Hey, yo, Quantic, run them bands up.
Barella, what the fuck is this?
Hey, yo, Quantic, run them bands up.
Barella, what the fuck is this?
Ayo, Quantic, run them bands up.
Barella, what the fuck is this?
Hello, humans. Welcome to Power Report Live. I am Dan. I am joined with Bam, who does not want to be here. I forced him to do it. Does not hate it. He does not love it. I don't know. The Bloomberg blaster himself, Benjamin Dixon, and
what's up?
Lastly, here joining the boys is Emma Vigeland.
Oh, no sushi. No sushi? I'm out of here.
Yeah.
I only eat West Virginia sushi.
Oh my god.
What's up, guys? Thanks for having me, Dan.
No, thank you all for making the time out. I especially give extra thanks to the East Coast guests because, it's just much easier for Bam and I emotionally, except for Bam because I'm here. So there's that.
So he's got to deal with that.
Yeah.
Not easy.
There are people in the chat who are usually like upset when it's only me hosting and it's not Bam. So clearly they like him more, which is totally fair. Way more knowledgeable. We were just talking before the show if we're gonna quiz him on if he can point to countries on the map of the globe that he has behind him, specifically in Africa, and we think he probably could. me not so much, but like.
I told you not to bring that up on there, man. Why'd you do that? Make me have to.
No. You don't have to say anything. You can just say that like you like maps.
No,
and
I
you like the
I
globe.
know. Listen, it's a great picture you got on the back of the wall.
I was an only child. It was a lot of alone time. You know, you just like
Memorizing maps.
Literally, yeah.
I was the same.
Did you guys ever have those Guinness World Book of Records books?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Oh
Yes,
yeah, those were
my
almanacs.
my favorites.
Mm-hmm.
Oh yeah.
I would read the whole dictionary. I'm a total nerd. Didn't really pick up that much, but had a good vocabulary. Didn't help me on the SATs.
My dad did that. My dad did that, and so I used to do it. Like he told me he did it. So as a kid, I was like, "Oh, I got to do this myself," and like I got to read the Bible front to cover, and I just set myself up for complete failure because like that does not hold the attention span of a 9-year-old or whatever.
I'm so glad for audiobooks. I really am.
Yeah.
So there's a lot going on. This has been like one of the most tumultuous months covering news I think a lot of us can speak to, and I didn't want to get dive right into the thick of it. I wanted to start with something relatively lighter, I guess. And is great news that is happening. Like unions are getting deals. With the SAG-AFTRA strike, there's. Just today, I think the Postal Workers Union, which is like one of the largest unions in the country, basically did an endorsement of a ceasefire, which was really great to see. And so you're seeing a lot of on-the-ground power that I sometimes get cynical and think we just don't have. And so that's a good thing, too. Mm-hmm. What's also good, and we can talk about that in a moment, but what's also good is... Okay, not good, let's say, but I came across on the hell site that is Twitter a video of Nick Fuentes reviewing the debate. It's everything. You just go on stream, watch the debate. He has a nice little green screen set up behind him. And I think it's interesting to see who he is rooting for in this and how. And it also highlights another moment of the debate, which I just have to say is Vivek Ramaswamy is one of the dumbest people to run in a long time. Especially on foreign policy. Okay.
I'm sorry, because he really promotes himself to be so smart. That's the thing.
Didn't Andrew Yang do that as well? This is the other kind of entrepreneur, but for the right. Mm. And Yang is insanely stupid. And they both have similar kind of slogans, math period and truth period for Vivek. Yeah. So, it's just, I like when these rich guys are a little too big for their britches and just prove to everybody that they're really not all that, except they just kind of lucked into making a lot of money and don't have a ton of empathy. So
Yeah, I think a lot of people would agree with that Andrew Yang point if they're smart. A lot of people fall for it. One dumb moment before we get into this one, which is somehow not, I think maybe a dumber moment. I'm not sure. He started by attacking the host and going, "I'd rather have a debate with Tucker Carlson, Elon Musk, and Joe Rogan, and then we'd be able to have a conversation." About like what, aliens?
yeah, it's pathetic.
Okay. I don't love playing a clip of Nick Fuentes. Like, fuck this guy. The Alex Jones Kanye West thing was kind of funny, but like, in a morbid way. But anyways, here is that part of this is the part where him watching the.
Mr. Ramaswamy, are you persuaded by President Zelensky's urgent new plea? Where do you stand on more funding?
I'm absolutely unpersuaded. And I'm actually enjoying watching the Ukraine Hawks quietly, delicately tiptoe back from their position as this thing has unwound into a disaster. The first half of this race, I was the only person standing for it. Now they're actually quietly coming around to being more cautious, as they should. Level with the American people here. Ukraine is not a paragon of democracy. This is a country that has banned 11 opposition parties. It has consolidated all media into one state TV media arm. That's not democratic. It has threatened not to hold elections this year unless the U.S. forks over more money. That is not democratic. It has celebrated a Nazi in its ranks, the comedian in cargo pants, a man called Zelensky, doing it in their own ranks. That is not democratic. More facts for you that you won't hear from the mainstream in either party or the mainstream media. The regions of Ukraine that are...
So, like, he's more or less loving that entire thing, which was ridiculous garbage, and slanders to Zelensky, even before you kind of got to the point where he's like, oh, and by the way, he's a Nazi in cargo pants and a former comedian. Like, one of those things is not like the other. Also, he's Jewish.
He just leaves out that the country was invaded. Like, we just act like they're just existing there and getting rid of parties. It's literally been invaded. They're fighting for their lives.
Yeah, it's also fascinating too to see how these right wingers are using Nazi so callously. Like, I mean, I've now cited this on the show, and now we're already like 5 minutes in, and I want to bring up Israel, but Benjamin Netanyahu was criticized a few years ago for spreading a conspiracy theory that Hitler got the idea to exterminate the Jews from the Palestinian Grand Mufti. And they call Palestinians and Hamas Nazis regularly. And it's basically a way for fascist right-wing governments to deflect and to, it's to less of a degree in terms of efficacy in the United States, I would say, because there's a lot of sympathy for the Ukrainian people, mostly in opposition to Russia, but that's a bit of an aside. Like, these are two really far-right governments quite cynically deploying the word Nazi, and then like also in turn making it so it's completely meaningless in discourse, which is a really scary phenomenon, because Nazis were a real thing and are a real thing, and they're genocidal and they're freaks.
And it's a case of, I know you are, but what am I? It's the case of projection. Not necessarily in the case of Vivek. I just think he's a dork. But in terms of Benjamin Netanyahu, it's funny that he identified so much with Adolf Hitler that he would cap for Adolf Hitler in that way. But it shows you how when you really hate a group, there's no devil in hell that you won't align with. And this is what Benjamin Netanyahu is doing. He's saying, I would rather align with Adolf Hitler than the Palestinian people and with Muslims. And he's demonstrating that in real time.
Or that they're the real, the Germans were really bad, but the real Nazis, ones that those are the brown people 3 miles from our border, the poorest people on the planet, some of the poorest people on the planet. So, and when
you know what? See, let's see. It pulls us in. It pulls us in. It pulls us in.
And just these ones right here too, because at the same time, Israel is doing everything they can to normalize relations with Arab nations, and has normalized relations and peace treaties with its bordering nations. but like these ones right here, they're worse than the Nazis. But like the other ones are
Yeah.
pretty cool though. Like I
Right.
remember when, I mean, I've said this a million times on there, but I remember when Ariel Sharon went to Egypt and those Egyptian politicians were kissing his hand.
Yeah. Well, that's why it's so laughable when you see like this argument that, hey, yeah, Israel has the United States and the entire West behind it, but look, all these Arab countries really support Palestine. I'm like, do they outside of statements to like their population so they don't look like they've completely abandoned the Palestinian people? Because a lot of Arabs in the region feel like, you know, they feel fealty to the Palestinians and want to support them. Like, but outside of just complete, you know, I guess like asides or rhetoric, there's really not much to glean from those claims that like all these Arab countries are materially supporting the Palestinians, because 80% of the countries relying on food aid to survive. 90% of the population in Gaza doesn't have clean water. So if they're actually getting all this support from these Arab countries, these shady Arab countries, they're not really feeling it, right? But then I guess Israel would blame Hamas, which also, by the way, Israel likes having in power and has empowered. So
yes, I don't think it can be restated enough. I know a lot of people say this, but yes, Benjamin Netanyahu helped get money to Hamas. Yes, Benjamin Netanyahu propped up Hamas to undermine the Palestinian Authority. Yes, Benjamin Netanyahu is now wagging the dog. Anyway, I'm telling you, man, if you don't pull us in, it's gonna be the hour about Israel.
Dan,
go ahead.
Sorry, go ahead. No, I just was like, Dan, I'm taking over. I mean, it's Israel Hour, so hosted by me.
It will be. It definitely will be. The only reason I wanted to start with that and kind of lead into the stuff with Israel and Gaza is that I went into that debate not expecting the angriest moment. I think Matt Let's the angriest moment he'd ever seen in American politics with Nikki Haley calling Vivek scum, right? I knew he would be dumb. I knew Tim Scott would bore me to death. And mostly I knew that you were going to hear some of the most genocidal rhetoric you've seen in a presidential debate, at least since, I don't know, were they doing presidential debates during slavery? Like, this was really, I don't know, like, that was the consensus you see from the right. But from the left...
That wasn't genocidal. They were trying to keep us alive.
I mean, genocidal rhetoric, at least.
Can't work dead.
We could get in some trouble on this group. These.
Okay. The main point is that that's how the Republicans feel. We know that's how they are, appealing to voters. They think that's how they're appealing to voters. But it's working because that's not rocking the boat too much. You have Democrats who are censuring genocidal things that Israeli politicians are saying, right? What was that one guy in Florida who said
it was a woman.
It was the woman,
the state rep essentially, not Cynthia Nixon. Her last name is Nixon. I'm blanking on her first name, but she introduced a motion essentially to call for an end to genocide, and they only got two other
Angie Nixon
politicians to sign on to it. There we go. You would know, actually. I think she is a representative from the Jacksonville area.
Absolutely. She is phenomenal. And she put out the photo, to make it clear where she stands, a photo of her standing behind Ron DeSantis, giving the right kind of expression that you should give that man the look. But she proposed that. And here's the thing. They attacked her so viciously about calling for a ceasefire, right? And that's the part that's really triggering about this, is that, those of us who are calling for a ceasefire, we are lambasted as being either anti-Semitic or not sympathetic to the plight of Jewish people. And there's always that turn of a phrase. They're not talking, they say Jewish people to make us look anti-Semitic. Oh, no, I love the Jewish people. I absolutely hate Benjamin Netanyahu as much as I'm allowed to hate as a Christian, because he's a genocidal maniac who has killed over 4,000 children in less than 4 weeks. And they think that we who are calling for a ceasefire are the absurdities. No, those people who are making us look like we're crazy, they're gaslighting us into genocide.
Yeah, I mean, and we're not saying genocide just to be edgelords. Like the first of all, I mean, just to like rattle off some statistics I have off the top of my head here. Israel dropped more bombs in 1 week on that 141 square foot plot of land that has 2.4 million people in it. It's one of the most densely populated places on the planet, than the United States did in the entire first year in Afghanistan, a place that's over 250,000 square miles. So 1 week, 141 square miles, a whole year, 250K square miles. That's what we're talking about in terms of the amount of bombing that's taken place there. And so that's not anything that you can even like, that has to be genocide. And there has been an open letter signed by 800 genocide scholars and international legal minds saying that same thing. So like there are literal academics behind this, that like people can't turn for honesty about Israel to any really like Western politician. And really the Western press is largely complicit in downplaying the plight of the Palestinians as well. You have to look to academics and to international humanitarian organizations, because that's the only place you're going to get the truth.
And like that's the dynamic with that, and why, you know, it's not like I'm trying to sling genocidal around either, but I don't know what kind of rhetoric it is, and it kind of goes towards this. You know, Meghan McCain was going all like, oh, first they come for me or the Zionists or whatever. Like people are making it about themselves. But when you see oppression around the world, that's why you see a lot of protests around the world of people, a lot of them people of color, knowing that, oh, no, I've seen that happen to people I care about or people in my history. Like, that's something that resonates, because it's been, you know, people can get specific about, is it genocide? Is it ethnic cleansing? And that was like a talking point in the beginning of this too, that was meant to distract from the actual thing that's going on. But we're talking about the Western press not being trustworthy, and Israel is going in and cutting off electricity to Gaza. And well, at least the Israeli Defense Force still has enough electricity to target journalists and their families. I think something like more than 40 journalists have been killed in recovering what's just happening in Gaza. Meanwhile, the IDF can apparently has content creators on lock, because they're making all these different videos. They have their own different literal war room. Candidates have war rooms on Twitter, like DeSantis war room or Biden war room. But no, they're actually making propaganda in real time with all the electricity and all of the water and all of the food and all of the medical supplies that Israel has, that Gaza is absolutely lacking. And last point on that is the little trickle of stuff that is able to get in, they're being killed. Like, you've heard hospital workers who are now going in there and talking about how their friends who are doctors are dying. They're having to shut down hospitals and make decisions of okay, well, who do I have the resources to save? And whoever I don't ultimately dies. That is, I don't know what else to call it when it's so deliberate, when it's so recorded, not just in the past month. It's happened repeatedly. It's a tactic. That's why it's so easy to call out. But I don't know what else to call it when we're seeing this.
Yeah. That's what they called Bashar al-Assad in Syria. They said he was committing genocide. And when I look at these pictures and videos in Gaza, it looks like Aleppo. And what did they call Bashar? What did they call him? Genocidal, all the he was horrible. Oh, he's killing his people, but it's when you're occupying people, you're doing the same thing.
That's right. That's right. And it's so what they don't, people fail to realize that for every action, there's an opposite reaction, right? And so in this case, what Benjamin Netanyahu has done and his far right-wing government, what they have done is that they have put themselves on the forefront of a global a globally observable genocide such that there's anything that they can do to try to convince us of as otherwise, right? Because what we've been able to not say about Palestine for years is just to call it a genocide, generally speaking, right? The occupation, we can't call it an occupation, right? There's just language that we've never been able to use without getting severe backlash. Well, now they've bought the farm and they've gone all in on a clear case of genocide. The entire North Side has been obliterated. All the culture, all the people, all the everything, all the traditions. It's going to take multiple generations, if ever, for something to spring up out of that. But they are so vicious with this that they have now made it clear that they intend on staying indefinitely, which suggests to me that Benjamin Netanyahu has some blueprints for new settlements on his desk right now.
Oh, you kidding me? They've already said they are dividing Gaza into. You said it right, Ben. Like, I mean, they are dividing Gaza into two portions, for counterterrorism. And North Gaza is going to be completely annexed. This is clear. They don't want these people. They see them as surplus population. They see the occupation as a way to make sure that their lives are as miserable as possible, so that either they're subjugated because they kind of deserve it because, they're terrorists, all of them, right? Or they leave if they're some of the good ones, and they leave their entire way of life and their families and the ancestry that they have there, and they uproot their lives and they go to another country. You know what's the most, the thing that bothers me so much about some of the discourse you hear about this is why don't the other Arab countries take them? You hear that all the time. Why don't they just take them? Well, first of all, why did they have to be displaced in the first place?
Right.
Let's ask that question. Taken away from their home. But putting that aside, say it's primary to bomb the hell out of this place. Fine. Why do you assume that Arab countries are all a monolith and have the capacity to take these people, have the political will to take these people? You would never ask that of, say, Ukrainian refugees.
Never.
In the wake of the Russian invasion, and say go to these other white countries,
go to other Eastern European countries.
Exactly.
But also, we talked about this last week. Actually, the Arab nations in the region already took Palestinians.
Of course, yeah.
In Jordan, most of the people are Palestinian. In Lebanon, there's so many Palestinians. In Egypt, there's so many Palestinians. There's so many Palestinians in the UAE. They already got displaced, and they already were in these other countries in Syria. There's a whole there was a whole apartment complex. It's all Palestinians. So they already were displaced, and they already took Palestinians already.
Yeah. Yeah.
I was listening to you as you guys were talking. It also reminded me of another way that Benjamin Netanyahu and Joe Biden, for whatever reason, at this phase in his life, decided to do this. They have given a giveaway, a freebie to the East, right? In the East versus West, the Vladimir Putin versus NATO, right? Everything that they poured money into to protect Ukraine and defend Ukraine for all of the reasons. Some of them are good, some of them are bad. They have given the narrative to Vladimir Putin because they're actually doing genocide. It's going to be hard to make people care about Ukraine indefinitely when you are simultaneously funding genocide right before our eyes. It's hard for me to just pick up and I don't want people to get this wrong. I have supported Ukraine since before the invasion. I was one of the people come on now, we know he's getting ready to invade. I was not on the side of folks who dismissed that. So I have been supportive of Ukraine the entire time, in interviewed many Ukrainians. But when we see the United States of America simultaneously do something good in Ukraine and then turn around and do this evil, this objective evil by any measure, even if you don't believe in evil, this is evil. How can you expect us to continue to care about supporting Ukraine or keeping America and the United States of America and the West in this hegemony, in this position of power, when you demonstrate that you could do this kind of evil? Y'all making Vladimir Putin look good.
It honestly is a massive black stain on a legacy that Biden said he was going to come into office and repair. And I do believe that helping Ukraine with their defense is just.
Yes.
Largely, as you say, there are good and bad reasons, certainly, but like broadly, it's just. And pulling out of Afghanistan also was a significant foreign policy move that moved us away from the forever wars in the Middle East. And then the United States could kind of feasibly say, we have our moral core back. I mean, was it ever there? But like from a branding perspective, from dealing with, or trying to make do diplomacy and things like that. That was some of what Biden said. He wanted to restore the respectability. That's gone here. Putin's probably thrilled about this. It's one, a distraction, and two, it undercuts the United States globally. Like in that resolution in the United Nations for a ceasefire, only 14 nations voted no, and it was the United States and like a bunch of other smaller countries, I think, and Ukraine abstained. Even the UK, which is led by Tories right now, abstained. Canada abstained. Or they didn't vote yes or no, but still, like, you just see how isolated the United States is. But from the perspective of people in this country, like, we think we're the center of the planet, and like, it is deeply depressing to me that the Jewish people have gone through so goddamn much and have gone through a Holocaust, and that generational trauma still lives on and is still so omnipresent. And that memory has been basically bastardized by a bunch of freakish, like, Zionists, right? Which is the same as like a Christian nationalist or a Hindu nationalist.
Come on.
It's a religious and ethnic nationalist movement. And all of those are bad. And they have decided that they would rather tether themselves to an entire group of people and the trauma that they face in the worst crime, arguably in the history of the world, the genocide of Jews and others by Nazi Germany, and use that immense emotional weight and trauma in order to do their own crimes. That is such an injustice. And so many of these wonderful Jewish groups in this country, like Jewish Voice for Peace and If Not Now, they're doing God's work. But God, they shouldn't have to do this, because their Jewishness is being cynically weaponized by a fascist government.
Which makes that video of that you mentioned about Benjamin Netanyahu referencing Hitler and saying that Hitler got the idea from a Muslim. It makes it so much more salient when you see exactly what you just said, Emma.
Yeah, and like it's been reported. There's never been any like audio of it, but it's been pretty fairly like reported of that, because if there were audio, it'd be playing it to a lot of people
everywhere.
Oh no, yeah.
Of Netanyahu?
Oh yeah.
No, I've played audio of that. Yeah.
Oh,
no,
there is.
there's a
Okay, no,
speech.
it must have been an article I was reading.
Yeah, no, he gave some sort of speech, and there's some video of it as well.
Yeah.
At some point, I do have smoke for Saudi Arabia, but
There's one last thing about let's cut off the Benjamin Netanyahu point. I'll just say that he was mad unpopular in Israel for gutting the courts, and he was mad unpopular in Israel in the days after the October attacks. And I was telling people that doesn't mean Israel's all of a sudden getting like a left-wing bent and they're becoming like pro-Palestinian all of a sudden. Unfortunately, you have groups and people that are there, but no, they're mad that he could possibly let an attack like that happen. So
he branded himself as the Great Protector. That was his political brand.
Yeah. So by expanding his, reach in Gaza and having plans to, start settlements there, and I think if anything, it's a political Hail Mary for him to get more power. If all the other reasons you mentioned as well, but also, yes, he is that sick and that cynical to be like, well, maybe, taking the parking lot approach might get me some votes next time. So, yeah. But, bam, Saudi Arabia.
Well, I mean, I guess I'm repeating this because I did say it before, but it just really, I do think that this all started because of the normalization talks that Israel and Saudi Arabia were having. And it was funny because we were going to do an episode. I couldn't be on that week. And I wanted to talk to Dan about the Israel and Saudi Arabia meeting. Like there was a Saudi delegation that went to meet with the Palestinian Authority in the West Bank. And I think it was the Israeli tourism minister or something like that who went to Saudi Arabia. but that's a huge deal. And then, maybe 2 weeks after, then Hamas attacked. And I do think it was because they wanted to do everything they could to stop those peace talks. But we've seen now that Saudi Arabia is like really backing the Palestinian Authority. I think Saudi Arabia is, I don't want to say happy, but they don't mind what's going on. They want Hamas out of Gaza, and they want the Palestinian Authority to take power there. And I don't think Saudi Arabia cares about Palestinian people. But the thing that like bugs me and is just like makes me angry is that we know that next year around this time, our gas prices are going to go sky high.
Oh yeah.
Saudi Arabia is going to do everything they can to get Trump back in office. Like they're going to be teaming up with Russia to get those gas prices $7 or something. And like it's like they're gonna be like pushing, doing whatever they can to affect American politics, and they can't do shit when it comes to Israel bombing Palestinians. They have nothing, and this is a powerful country in that region. Like Saudi Arabia holds a lot of weight in that region.
Yes,
to the extent that Israel even wants to normalize relations with them. Saudi Arabia doesn't border Israel. Israel made a peace with Egypt in '82, I think, something like that. Jordan. These are countries that border them. They had fought wars against them. Saudi Arabia is not there. Saudi Arabia is not invading Israel. They're not a threat, but they have so much power. And, and it's like a very like right-wingish government. And Netanyahu, I'm sure, wants to be buddies with MBS. And they were working on that. When you see like what's happening in this thousands and thousands of Palestinians getting killed, it's just like, damn, like y'all can't do nothing. Like there's nothing you can do. But when it comes to these elections here, they're going to do something.
I think honestly that stuff too with the Palestinian Authority, like the Palestinian Authority might be the only entity that has less popularity than Hamas with Palestinians because it's viewed as a puppet of the Israeli government. Rightly so, at least controlled opposition.
And there was one point that, not to bring it back to Nick Fuentes, but there's a point you hear repeated a lot among conservatives that like there's a reason that Putin is doing this because Ukraine has some like relation to Russia as well. And like there's that same context where you have Ukrainian politicians who are viewed as puppets of Putin. And so when you had the initial invasion of a couple of those regions, they were like more amicable for that. So it's like a similar dynamic that's going on.
Yeah. What I see happening, I don't know if Israel's going to put settlements back in Gaza. I mean, they took those settlements out in 2006, I think it was. I don't know. We'll see. But I think they're going to do whatever they can to get the Palestinian Authority in power in Gaza. You're going to have Saudi Arabia and Egypt backing that. And then what you're going to have is like I hate to say it like this, but what you're going to have is like terrorism in Gaza. Like the Hamas fighters are going to be doing like guerrilla attacks against like the Palestinian Authority people. It's going to end up like a civil war that we had before in Gaza. It's going to be that again. And it's just going to be hell for the civilians even more.
I agree with your framing there and your projection. I can totally see that playing out exactly that way. The only fly that might be in the ointment is they have completely leveled the place, and there's going to have to be a rebuilding of Gaza, particularly northern Gaza. And I don't know. They are malicious enough to just do this. I do think that they're strategic. Benjamin Netanyahu's right-wing government, I think one of their goals is to retake the land. We have to see it
there are
play out.
tweets. Sorry, I mean to cut it, but like there are tweets of IDF soldiers saying like this is our ancestral land. These are our beautiful beaches. These are ours now. So like I mean at the very least, like Netanyahu, I don't think he's a religious fundamentalist. I think he's just a fascist. But the religious fundamentalists, sorry.
So he's an atheist.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, then there you go. Like, but I do think that he's like, just like Trump is not religious, but his coalition is involved with religious fundamentalists. Those religious fundamentalists are desperate to settle, and they want all of Gaza. They want to go into Lebanon. They want all of the West Bank. I mean, this is an expansionist. It's Zionism. It is.
Exactly. And Emma, thank you so much. When you put it, that all of these types of religious nationalisms are acting the same. They're operating the same way, whether it's Hindu nationalism, whether it's Islamic nationalism or Christian nationalism here in the United States. And they have all unified, right? There's a global coalition of ethno-nationalists and religious nationalists who all agree that they want to change the world order from liberal democracy. So that's where we are.
Yeah, right. I mean, and I think like it's much, when you put it in that context, it's easier for people to understand. And when you say there's a global world order, who's Modi siding with here?
Come on.
Modi's cozying up to Netanyahu. I did an interview on the Majority Report with Anthony Lowenstein, who wrote a book called The Palestine Laboratory. I did it back in June, I think. And he basically spoke about how like the Israeli military industrial complex, despite it being a relatively small country, is now one of the 10 largest, it's one of the 10 largest exporters of weapons technology and surveillance technology in the world. That's all been subsidized and built up by the United States. And now it's its own organism. And they do all these backroom deals and sell a bunch of weapons to Modi's government. And what do they have in common? They want to suppress a Muslim minority in their state. And so like, this is the coalition that we're seeing, and frickin' stupid ass Biden is walking right into it. It's amazing. It's not gonna, who's Netanyahu eventually, once Biden doesn't give him the green light or like tries to get him to claw back in some way on all of his genocidal aims, he's gonna turn on that guy like a dime, because he knows that Trump is gonna do way better for him. And same thing with MBS. This is why, sucking up to them in like a half-assed way is like, no, be in opposition to these freaks. It's not going to end well.
It's not.
I do feel like, if by chance we did get a Trump presidency, or who knows, maybe even under Biden. And once again, we were talking about this before, but Hamas is like the only, like Hamas is allied with Iran, Syria, but Hamas is like the only kind of connection that Iran has to like the Sunni Arab world. Like that's the only connection. If Hamas is like destroyed, so to speak, like I think it really primes up an Iran invasion. Like that, like
an Iran invasion of who?
Like a coalition of the willing against Iran.
Oh, an invasion of Iran. Okay.
Spearheaded by the United States and Saudi Arabia, I guess. Like, because
I hope the
Arab/Muslim world doesn't really have. I mean, aside from like the Shia people, like doesn't really have much connection to Iran, but people know that Iran supports Hamas. Like they're the ones that support this group and Hezbollah. But without Hamas there, like they're like, okay, well, we don't really need them anymore. Like, let's, and Iran isn't doing themselves any favors by everything that happened with Masa Amini and their crackdowns and those protests last year. I think that was last year.
Last year, I think.
Right? Last year, September, I think.
Time is a flat circle these days,
But yeah, Iran isn't like doing itself any favors. They're not looking good in the world, and it'll be terrible. I hope it doesn't happen. But the like everything in that region is like so connected. Like one domino falls, and like it's just easy for the other ones to start falling too.
On that,
go ahead. No, I'm hopeful that that's not the case. That's really it. Go ahead.
I was like,
Yeah.
on that positive note, bring it back here. We're kind of talking about fundamentalism in America and how some of the most like virulent right wingers in this are like, no, but you see, for our Revelations plan, we need the Jews to have Israel. Maybe some of them will be
Yes.
saved, maybe we won't, but like at the end of the day, they're aligned on their aims and their disregard of life because of that fundamentalism. But they're also the ones who are starting to, under that guise, come out in America as being pro-Israel. And I think there's so much of that, there's so much of background that, kind of on the ground here makes these conversations, not more difficult because, again, it's clear what's going on, but it makes it so there's so much more friction when you're trying to have discourse about it on air, when you're talking to people in your own personal lives, because it's tied so closely into interpretations of religion and a lot of
Yes.
fundamentalism and, to be real, a lot of money. And I'm not just talking about like Jewish like groups and organizations like Zionist ones, but I'm also talking about PragerU and all
Yes.
like who's also like, I think Prager's Jewish also, but like you have religious fundamentals like the Koch brothers. You have all these religiously fundamental people who have a lot of money as well. And so that's what they're bankrolling. And because they're bankrolling it, politicians are scared. They're worried about being primaried. Like the Nina Turner is a classic example of that. So it's all like really a lot here, especially, right?
But you see what the funny thing is, like MBS as like the fundamentalist, like the most fundamentalist country in the Middle East, Saudi Arabia, like he got himself in there too. Like he's part of that crowd, that like right wing
Money talks.
Yeah, money talks. So like these people aren't really like there's not at the higher levels, they're not true believers, as usually how it goes. The people on the street are true believers, but once you get up there, it's just like, how can we help each other? Because it's Saudi Arabia. Like Saudi Arabia, I mean, granted, like I spent 10 years in the Muslim community. I went to Hajj, everything, I've seen it all. Saudi Arabia is like the reason for so much like that so much fundamentalism got exported around the world.
Yeah. No doubt.
But it doesn't matter, and whatever you'll hear about Jewish people or Christians in like those communities, like, I'm not going to repeat it, but he got himself a seat at the table.
It's because Americans, particularly Americans, and I think there's a bit of white supremacy tied in it too. This expectation that they can manage Saudi Arabia and that they can get what they need out of it in terms of capitalism, right? They can make the money that they want to make, and they trust the wealth that they're getting out of it more than the risk of empowering the people who struck us on 9/11. And we have a nice little way of turning away and projecting our anger towards Iraq and Afghanistan, right? So Saudi Arabia has for a very long time gotten away with, I mean, look at what they're doing in Yemen. I mean, all things considered, what Saudi Arabia has been allowed to do to Yemen is an evil of the highest order as well. So I don't know, man. Maybe the West is just as terrible as what's that boy Jackson Hinkle?
Yeah.
Whatever.
I mean, look, we are that's the thing though, is like a lot of this, I would say, is a creation of this fundamental anxiety in the West of a multipolar world.
Mm-hmm.
The United States is losing influence. We're still the world superpower militarily, and like culturally, I think we're also fairly centric, but like there are many different kind of economic avenues that different countries are going down in terms of like making backdoor deals, relationships without kind of the okay of the United States. And so We are a bloated, dying superpower. And one way, I thought that the early parts of the Biden administration were a bit stabilizing on that front. But one way to accelerate that is to completely isolate yourself from the rest of the world in the way that we did in Iraq by backing a completely illegal and unjustifiable war of brutality, and in this case, a genocide by Israel.
No, I'm just like,
we got a second win, Israel 2.0, or
oh God, I can't believe how some people like see it in certain situations and don't in others. And like I've had this, I'm trying not to make this about me, right? But I've had this thing in other situations where I was looking at Ukraine, and I think that's the justifiable reason to do that. But there are so many like other atrocities that are going on, flare-ups that happen here or there, that are less advantageous for Americans to pay attention to. There's a lot of picking and choosing that's going on. But from a lot of liberals, especially a lot of liberal people, like I've learned a lot about, I guess, like myself and my standards, and a lot about that gap in other people's standards and where their morals take a long walk off a short pier, essentially. This has been the illuminating aspect of that, has been where people are willing to cut off their moral. And I kind of just don't know how to. I've been like paying attention to politics for God, like maybe 15, 16 years. I've been talking about it like a lot, but I don't know how to argue with that when you have that big of a gap, like that big of a difference.
It is interesting to see where people cut off their morality. I suggest an easy way to find it is to ask yourself the question, well, what are you willing to give up your morality for, right? I think if people just pause and reflect, maybe we all have that line. I'm hoping that we don't, though, because look at what you're capable of doing when you cross that line. When you cross that line, you're able to look at us in the face and say that we are wrong for calling for a ceasefire. They called Angie Nixon, I think they called her like a devil, because she called for a ceasefire. And so when you get to the point where you can ignore morality for whatever reason, it really turns you into a person who can't see straight. Like they're seeing upside down. But I think that's also a part of the strategy. There's some people who are not victims here, and they're strategically turning things upside down to use those type of attacks to keep us from getting an actual ceasefire. You know what I mean? It's so frustrating.
Well, that's the thing. That's the thing. All right, here's where I'll get a little spicy. I am so sick of these coddled Westerners who are white passing, okay, making this about themselves when every 10 minutes in Gaza, a child is dying.
Come on.
I don't really give a shit about like your sensitive kind of attitude, your sensibilities in suburbia. Like you're fine. You live in a $600,000 house. You live in a suburb of Philadelphia. I'm just picking a random place, but you understand the types of like the, whatever, Amy Schumer or whatever is a high profile example of somebody who has decided that they are the true victim here. It's not the poor people in Gaza. It's not the people who are literally put on a caloric diet by the government that occupies them. They can't drive on certain roads because that's just for Israelis. The Palestinians have to drive on separate roads. And they can't vote in the elections of the place that actually like determines their livelihoods. But you're the victim because you feel uncomfortable, because you don't really necessarily connect with, and you don't fundamentally ask why, the pro-Palestinian movement. And like, that's been the most discouraging thing. And I'm aware that like I'm a white girl, right? But I'm really disappointed in other white people I know in my personal life. And like white members of Congress, all of the people that in the House that have signed on to the ceasefire are POC. And it's like, why is that? Why can't we have a freaking white person actually sympathize with the Palestinian people? And in part, I just really do think that it's because like it's so much easier to identify those systems of oppression when it's happened to you, but it's deeply depressing that, like, you know, people that posted black squares are also posting freaking I stand with Israel. How does that connect? How does that connect? It doesn't connect at all. It's actually an opposition. Same thing with the Ukrainian flag and I stand with Israel. You're completely, like, you have no like intellectual basis in fundamental belief system behind this. It's just reacting to, you know, where the power is. It's frustrating.
They're starting. Well, I want to say that me and Dan probably laughed when you said $600,000 because that's real in Southern California, and that's nothing. Like,
yeah, no, I got you.
You're living in somebody's like gang territory, $600,000. But no, like a lot of people just like started this situation at Hamas's attack, and obviously none of us need to like say this. Like we're against civilians dying. Like nobody's like celebrating Hamas's attack. You know, it's sad to see those people those Israelis that died or got kidnapped. Like that's sad.
And if you're saying that like people were celebrating it, like, oh, there are people online, like people online like talk about anime porn half the time, all right? Like you could pull people online talking about anything at any given time that's just like ridiculous. That doesn't count. Like there weren't people out in the streets like for this. So yeah.
Yeah. Like show me like a clip of somebody like on their show saying that was great. Like, no, it's not gonna happen. But they're starting this situation at that attack, and it's like, no, dude, like it doesn't start there. You're talking about people that are occupied. They're fighting against their occupier every day, just like their occupier is fighting them every day and bludgeoning them every day and humiliating them every day. And it's an apartheid every day. Like so many people have stories about like, some 18-year-old Israeli soldier pushed my mom over into the street, or like was roughed up my grandma, or like my uncle that's like in a wheelchair, they're going through all this stuff. You know what I mean? Like
we had a Palestinian who moved to America call into the show 2 days ago who said his best friend was shot in front of him when he was 16 by an IDF soldier.
Yeah, like this is like a common occurrence, especially in Gaza. Like it's especially bad there. So it didn't start with what Hamas did. It started 50, 60, whatever, 100 years. I don't know how many years.
75.
Ago.
Yeah.
Some people. Anyway, it's not about me. I don't support what Hamas did because I don't support any women and children, just combatants. If you're going to fight combatants and leave it there. Period. Number two, that's just my personal opinion. But then two, where was their George Bush's strategery? What was the goal here? Did they really believe that this was going to be the tip of the spear of liberation? Except for this, there may be a path forward to liberate Palestine because of what Hamas did, but it's only because of the pain and suffering of the 10,000 Palestinians who have died. Right? Yeah. Is that the path that we want to choose as a strategy for liberation?
But that's the thing, is like, it's not, you know why it's not rational? It's because Hamas is also a religious fundamentalist group. Like, we return to this. Like,
they didn't want to liberate Palestine with that.
Hamas doesn't care about Palestinian citizens any more than the IDF does.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's the thing, is it's like that. But that's the reason that Netanyahu not Netanyahu, we should say the Israeli government, because it goes back to the 80s, them funding Hamas. Yeah. You know, like they favored Hamas coming into power. They were much more threatened by Abbas. They were much more threatened by leftist secular groups within the Palestinian people. And they said, there's a quote in a Likud party meeting from 2019 from Netanyahu as recently as now, you can look it up in Haaretz, saying, the empowerment of Hamas is a part of our strategy to keep the West Bank and Gaza separated, to keep them divided amongst themselves. This is like, when you hear the term human shields being used by Netanyahu, who the hell did he steal that from? George W. Bush, who said, well, it's okay for civilians in Iraq to die because Saddam Hussein is using human shields. And they also stole from the United States, or they were kind of doing it in concert in the 80s with the funding of religious fundamentalist groups in the Middle East, like the Mujahideen on the United States' end, in order to achieve are kind of very like myopic and self-involved freakish goals of furthering our own interests. And so like that is why Hamas is still robust, and it's completely because of the Israeli government. So to pretend like they are the sovereign entity over Gaza is insane, because Israel controls all of their borders, land and sea. They control what comes in, they control what comes out, they control their electricity, their water, their food. Hamas exists because Israel wants it to exist, because whenever there's a spurt of violence, they get an opportunity to clear out more Palestinians and say, hey, well, they sympathize with Hamas.
Mow the lawn.
Yep.
Put the Palestinians on a diet. No, history is not anti-Semitic. Pointing out like the condemn Hamas meme, right? Like that notwithstanding, right? But like pointing out why you even have these tensions and situations there to begin with is important. Pointing out why, wow, every time when you have a place where the median age of a person is below the age of 18 and all of their memories and all of their experiences nothing but trauma, all of what they've been told about their family are people who have been killed or like seriously injured in the same type of trauma, and somehow that's going to stop terrorism, that's going to make people not be motivated for terrorists. Like when you get, I want to pull up that cartoon really quickly from the Washington Post. It was playing into that exact like human shields dynamic, and he was thankfully, I don't know if the Washington Post did anything about it. I'd be honestly surprised they did. But I think the author originally apologized for it ultimately.
Yeah.
This one says, "How dare Israel attack civilians," with a really racially tinged caricature.
No.
Like if this were drawn about Benjamin Netanyahu, this would be anti-Semitic. like if it were like drawn like this the other way, like just the way the characterization is like wild, just wild. Washington Post, like, by the way,
you know what? See,
paper of record.
The thing is that they really, boy, have they fallen over into some real sick and evil kind of stuff that is going to be marked for the rest of humanity. Like they really have allowed themselves.
They're showing their ass like it's OnlyFans. Like,
come on, man. Thank you for summarizing it. This is madness. And it's being accepted by people who otherwise would call it out. They would call out this if it was in any other scenario.
Yeah.
But it's Muslims, it's Arabs. I mean, like we have not dealt with, I thought like maybe we had some understanding of how depraved we were after 9/11 and what no, we haven't grown at all.
No.
We haven't
Ron
grown
DeSantis said
whatsoever.
Islamophobia in quotes on the debate stage last night. I know like for Ron DeSantis the bar's in hell, but
not one of them mentioned any of the nearly 11,000 dead Palestinians, and that's a conservative estimate during their during that debate. I was waiting for it. They had like Christie was asked a direct question about the Palestinian boy, the 9-year-old who was killed in the hate crime in Illinois, which is especially relevant because look, I'm from New Jersey, and there's a sizable Palestinian American population in a community in Patterson. But putting that, I mean, like he didn't even directly answer it in that question either. Like it's like they're just not human and not worthy of recognition.
I think I was about to mention Chris Christie talked about something like, oh, right after 9/11, I'm paraphrasing, but he hugged a Muslim guy a couple times. Like
after he signed off on warrants to surveil mosques, he was one of the guys most instrumental in his time as U.S. attorney in New Jersey in like literally going after places of worship in the state. That was a big part of his role, being a Bush appointee in New Jersey.
But again, like it goes back to liberals here, where Bam and I were Bam and I were talking about this on a couple episodes back, or even yesterday. We remember the Muslim ban. Like we remember how visceral of a moment, and the Trump administration was full of a lot of visceral moments like this. But that was so early on. We were like, okay, we're really stepping the gas and going in the sixth gear that quickly. All right. But you even saw liberal outpouring in airports and an understanding of the worthiness of the life
Yeah.
of Muslim people, like 5 years later, 6 years later, fuck all of that. It's all gone.
Yeah, no, all of it, to the extent that I mean that coalition that showed up at the airports. I was at one of those rallies in Boston when the Muslim ban came down, and it was just a beautiful sight to see the kind of people that stood up at that moment. That coalition is dead. That coalition is dead is because like they're looking at us as if we're anti-Semitic because we're calling for a ceasefire, and we're looking at them like, oh, you're really supporting genocide. And that's pretty much the end of that coalition. And this is so scary. So it makes me take a step back and say, you got to examine you got to examine the goal by what actually happened. Like, people stop with Hamas and say that this was Hamas and this was their masterful plan and blah, blah, blah. No. Look at the outcome. The outcome is the destruction of one of the coalitions that is actually keeping America from falling. Okay. The fascists that are coming up in this next election are so against liberal democracy, and they are so committed to installing a theocratic fascist state that it is the most critical moment in history. And where do they strike at? Our ability, like we don't have the ability to gather as that type of. But you know what's beautiful though? I could put all that aside. You know what's beautiful? Seeing all the people around the world who are standing up for Palestine. Now that, my friends, that's a coalition.
And it's usually the case. Like I've been to many Palestine rallies. Like, people generally support Palestine. Like citizens, around the world. Like, they will stand up for Palestine, and you don't really get very many pro-Israel as a nation like rallies in the world. Like, people know that it's an apartheid state. But I want to go back to the human shield thing. It's just really hypocritical because it's like I remember the Arab Spring and like in Libya, Sarkozy and Obama are saying that, well, Gaddafi is using civilians as, I mean, like they're just like Gaddafi's bombing civilians, and Gaddafi says the rebels are using them as human shields. Like, no, you're not allowed to use that.
Yeah,
like a Marvel movie.
And in Syria, like, they say, Bashar, you're killing civilians. Like, well, the rebels are using them as human shields. You're not allowed to use that. Only we can use that one. Like, literally, like, only we can use that.
Go ahead.
No, it's like, are these terrorist groups barbaric for using human shields? Like, are they barbaric for going after civilians? Like, that's the underlying case. Like, Hamas is barbaric for going after civilians, which is why we have to kill them.
Yeah.
Even though we're going to kill civilians as well. And it's just, I mean, let's not even give them that credit. Like, I am so, the thing I can't stand is that people generally understand that Netanyahu is a psycho. And even when I speak to Zionists, right? Like, they're like, I don't like him mostly because of what he's done to the judiciary. And, he's crazy. He's a psycho. But then they can completely segment that from their assessment of the genocide, which they think is, well, they're really going after Hamas. He's being really rational in this way. It's like, no. This that is not really a two congruent thoughts, honestly. And so the point really is just like, you just see, I guess, how tribal and fearful people can get, and how what they can justify atrocities. And like, I'm so moved again by those demonstrators with Jewish Voice for Peace who chant, and I think I'm paraphrasing here, never again, not for anyone, something to that effect. That's what you have to, be consistent on, but unfortunately we're not. So
yeah,
I'm moved by seeing even like, because there's even the stereotype of, oh, these are progressive, like, reform Jews in the West who are standing behind this. I saw a video of a large group of Orthodox Jews who were like in uniform.
Oh, I met them at the pro-Palestine protests. I tried to shake the guy's hand. I went out like this, and he just stood there for like 5 seconds and stared at me. I was like, "Oh, thanks for coming out." And I told Sam Cedar about it later. He was like, "Oh, that guy's not going to shake your hand. Like, you're a woman. You're not even really a human being. So just like, don't do that again." I'm like, "All right, yeah." But kudos to them for standing firm on this at least.
Yeah,
like a sizable Orthodox community that like is not for the state of Israel for their own reasons, but
yeah.
I mean, it's breaking stereotypes. It's good to be able to see that kind of. I'm saying people standing up. I was kind of, like you said, Emma. You don't think that the Democratic Party, especially Biden, really expected the amount of blowback they would get, the amount of people in the streets. I don't think a lot of places around the world, like in Europe, like in France and Germany and the UK, where they're cracking down on even regular forms of protest, like nonviolent forms of protest. The thing I was kind of concerned with, I know like pontificating about the outcome of an election a year from now is a useless exercise. So I'm like not trying to get into it here. But yesterday I was like, what can Joe Biden, or what would Joe Biden logically do while still also being alive that will not depress Democratic Party support? Because Bam has a take that we don't need to get into, but that Trump may not be an option at the end of election this time in November. And Trump was a motivator for Democratic voters, much like the issue of abortion.
Negative partisanship.
Yes.
Yeah.
To get people out. If you have someone, I don't love this analogy here, but if you have someone like Nikki Haley who like can pass off as like semi-reasonable on abortion to like the large swath of Americans, and you don't have that much negative partisanship, or in any other combination that way, is Biden going to do anything that doesn't suppress his own party's vote?
Well, I'm going to tell you right now, like,
That's
look,
a tough one.
Nobody's voting for anything in this country because of Israel-Palestine. Like, that doesn't really register for people in that way. Like,
except for Arabs, Arab Americans in Michigan and in Wisconsin and Pennsylvania, sizable populations.
There's going to be some people, but like, there's constantly things going on. Like, I was at a big protest in like a couple years ago. Like, it was cracking. We were almost like fighting against like the counter protesters. Like, but it wasn't like the big news. But it was like it was up like downtown LA. This is something that's always going on, right? I think right now the thing that made it really, really big is that Hamas killed 1,400 people. Like, that's the brain like buster for people. It's like they never saw a situation where like Hamas did something to Israel, and I don't think people know how to like what they don't know.
And people think of Israel as similar to us, like it's like Western and wealthy, and it looks like it could be a city in, someplace in America.
That's why the Ukraine flags went up, but the South Sudan flags didn't.
Yeah.
No, it's like, if I don't know, it's hard to even compare here in like modern times. Like, who could it be that attacked? I mean, obviously we have like 9/11, but like these are like people coming from another place, but like people here like killing Americans, like you can't even like fathom that really. But I just feel like when Hamas did that, like, people wanted to have some sympathy for those Israeli people that got murdered and kidnapped, and I think you should, because I do. But then once Israel goes on like this genocidal war path, it's like, yeah, like you gotta walk and chew gum now. Like, you gotta be able to say both are bad, and that's just the part where people are struggling, I guess. Like, I still want to focus on that. It's like, no, dude, like both are bad. Like, they're killing civilians too. All Israel does is kill civilians.
Yeah, one's the one we fund. Like, that's the thing that is annoying me about the debate. Like, you're right? But the reason people are in the streets for to stop the funding to going to Israel is because, like, generally the rule of protest is that you protest what your government does. And that's like, people are like, oh, no one cares about the Israeli debt. Like, no, you mourn them, but you fight like hell for the living, and the living are being killed with our tax dollars. That's the difference. And And man, does it make me mad. Yeah.
It's maddening. It is. I've had to step away from my show for a few days because it should bother us on this level, right? I'm still deprogramming myself from being extremely fastidious with my words, because if I knew how to do anything, I knew how not to get called anti-Semitic. Oh, they couldn't catch me. No. But now they decided to start genociding. Well, then now you caught me red-handed because I can't do anything but call it what it is. It's a genocide. So, it's whatever now.
To that point.
Yeah, I can't even it's like silly to me, like the things that are being called anti-Semitic. Like, I'm like, come on, dude. Like, don't water it down. Like, this is a serious thing. Like, anti-Semitism is like a serious thing that needs to be fought against by everybody. But to just say like, oh, river to the sea is like, come on, dude. Like, really? Like, don't water it down.
Yeah. I think like, the Israeli government wants that. And that's like what people don't understand.
Who's the guy in the UK? Jeremy Corbyn. Yeah.
Yeah.
Like him.
King. But, people are like, I have one friend who I've been having a disagreement with about this. And like, I remember some months ago, like we're normally in lockstep, but Corbyn came up and my friend was like, oh, anti-Semitic, like, for sure. I was like, what's the example? Like, they can't come up with it. It's just like, it's general understanding. It's manufacturing consent.
Yes, it is.
But all right, guys, I got to dip. I am so tired. I did 3 shows today. This is my 3rd show, but I love my friend Dan. Love you guys. Really appreciate you all. Thanks so much, and I will talk to you all soon. Appreciate you all.
Great.
Thanks for coming on, Emma. Take care.
Take care.
Yeah, great seeing you guys. Bye.
Right.
And then there were 3.
Don't tell the cops. No. There's so much in that. Like, Ben, to that question from earlier, like, I guess there was that disagreement Bam and Emma had over, will people be voting on this next year? On the one hand, it's foreign policy. On the other hand, like, it's tax dollars. On the other hand, this is America, and long term, we don't remember atrocities happening. People at here or abroad. I used to make a big deal about Biden promising the George Floyd Accountability and Policing Act or whatever. And then in July of 2021, he was like, well, we tried sort of, but whatever.
Man, excuse me. Emma mentioned tired, and then now all of a sudden I'm yawning. Listen, I'm only going to, there's 2 parts to that answer, right? The average American, no. That's because Benjamin Netanyahu would have killed every Palestinian by next year. And as long as we have about 3 months, America will forget what happened, because that's what Americans do. Now, when it comes to folks who have voices and platforms like me and everybody else, oh man, like, we're having to do some soul searching here. Because how can you say, like, it's one thing for me to say you cannot let Donald Trump get into power, but it's another thing to say you cannot let Donald Trump get into power because he's a fascist. And then you turn around and look at what Joe Biden has let the fascists in Israel do. The fascist specifically. I like to call out Benjamin Netanyahu specifically, because this uniquely benefits him specifically, right? I don't just do that to cover my ass. I'm smart enough to do that, right? But I call out Benjamin Netanyahu specifically because he benefits the most from this scenario. He was the one who's under investigation for fraud right now, right? He's the one who had hundreds of thousands of Israelis march against him in the streets just prior to this. He's the one that funded Hamas. He's the one that helped prop them up and funded, I'm using loosely here. He allowed money that flowed to Hamas to get into Gaza, right? So he is the one who benefits the most from this. Now, the rest of that right-wing government, I include them too, man, because that is a definitive difference between the Jewish people and this ethno-nationalist right-wing extremism of Benjamin Netanyahu's party. And I think those distinctions matter.
I kind of want to reply to somebody in the chat.
No, getting to it.
Derek Hunsaker. I don't really understand this all the way, but he says Israel has human rights because they exist and have industry. How many times has Arafat refused sovereignty? And then he goes on to say Palestine could have agreed to a state multiple times and did not. He dies and Abbas is worse, and Israel leaves and Hamas is elected, and those who were elected have never held another election. And like that's partially correct, but not really, because Arafat didn't refuse sovereignty because he was going to have to give up Jerusalem. And he said, you know, for whatever good or bad you want to say about Yasser Arafat, like at the very least, he didn't like sell out his people when it came to Jerusalem. He was like, it's not my city to give it up. And so I'm not going to give it up. So were they able to have a state? I would say no. Like, I don't think Israel was ever like saying like, we're going to let you have a state. But in so much as they were, it was a state with like no control of this city. Like, I mean, it's not like they have much control anyway, but You're just completely giving up any kind of like rights to this place, which is a holy place for you, for these people, for the Muslims and Christians in this region who are Palestinian. So no, I don't really think that that's like the right characterization of like what Yasser Arafat did.
Well, y'all some smart brothers around here. Yeah.
It's mostly BAM.
Well, this is like, that's like my region. Like that's
your wheelhouse.
Yeah. And
yeah,
I remember those days, and I remember where I was when Yasser Arafat died. Like that was like a big deal. And it was terrible. They actually had him like, you know, he couldn't leave his compound for like weeks. It's a little bit fuzzy now, but that second intifada, like those times, like Israel was, it was terrible. They were bombing like the same things they're doing now, like using like bombs that can clear out a whole city block because like this one person's over there, we think. And it just like flattens whole buildings.
I done got in trouble, so let me. I'm gonna leave with a little bit more trouble before I go, if that's okay.
Yeah.
And you got to allow me to pivot a little. Listen, all love and respect, and solidarity and coexistence with my atheist brothers and sisters and agnostics, people who don't believe. I just want to preface it with this, but I'm a believer, and I can't believe that Benjamin Netanyahu and all the rest of the people supporting this actually believe that God is on their side in this. They can't believe that. And so I have to believe and conclude that they don't really believe in God.
Well, Benjamin Netanyahu is an atheist. He said it himself.
Yeah. That makes no. I'm not gonna say that because I love my atheist bro. You almost got me. No. I'm gone. I ain't getting.
Where's this? Before Benjamin Dixon leaves, let's look at the scoreboard. Let's get the scoreboard.
You sly little.
Do I have the memory right? Is it the BPD show?
For Twitter, it's at Benjamin P. Dixon, and the show, the Benjamin Dixon Show. Yeah.
Yes, thebpdshow.com. Does that work?
No, man. Listen, I'll get you guys new links soon. Don't worry about the old links. I get you new.
We
links
out
soon.
here. If you want to find Benjamin Dixon, he out here. All right.
I just look me up. You'll find me somewhere.
Okay.
Right.
Well, you got to come back because I first found you, and I was really happy to hear a leftist from the South that's also a Christian.
Hey.
I don't consider myself a Christian, but my family is from. Wait, you're
some
from
of
Georgia,
my best
right?
friends are Christian.
Wait. Well, I just want to make it clear. Wait, you're from
I dated
Georgia,
a Christian
right?
once. One time in college.
You keep setting me up. I was like, oh man, another black Christian leftist commentator on the internet.
Sorry. Okay, but you're from Georgia.
Most recently, I mean, yeah, we lived in Atlanta for some years where I did the bulk of the work that most people know me for. But
Okay.
no, I'm from the South, like Mississippi, lived in Georgia, Alabama, and now in you know.
Okay, I don't know if you know of a town in Alabama called Fayette.
Yeah. I've
Okay,
heard of
you
it,
know-
but I'm not familiar with any of the people.
Okay, well, that's where my family was from in Alabama.
Okay,
4,000 people in a dry county, and I spent many summers there. My grandfather was a Church of Christ preacher.
Oh,
We
boy.
used to go. He used to preach in Mississippi. We'd have to go to Mississippi on Sundays, doing fellowship, all that. So like, and I think it's important for people to like understand the difference between like people being conservative and being like right wing. Because my grandparents were conservative, very.
Okay.
They didn't
Yeah.
believe in music,
Oh,
but they believed in people's civil rights.
That's right.
And they
That's
were
right.
they were at the March on Washington with my dad and all that. So like I think it's like I think it's really important that we have people like you in our movement.
Appreciate it, man. Listen, it fits really well. Like my faith is liberation, and the predominant the left is predominantly about liberation, but we got some sketchy fellows out there who cross the Rubicon.
Dan.
Dan's a good man. I'm sorry, I didn't listen. I'm hoping I'm not misgendering, but I just
No,
assume
yes, we're good.
the pronouns. Okay. I try to be mindful of that, but I've been doing it all night, and every time I do it, I'm like, I did not verify. But no,
We didn't
we
introduce.
gotta
It's
have.
fair.
Yeah, we gotta have people of faith who are also people of good faith, right?
Exactly.
And that's and good faith requires coexistence, or else we ain't gonna have nowhere to practice my faith because we're gonna destroy the world. That's where we are right now. So
True.
I gotta come back. Definitely. Let me know when I can do it again. All right,
Please.
fellas?
Ben Dixon, thank you so much for joining. Take care. Well,
All right, I'm out too.
damn. Be stuck with me for at least 10 more minutes because it's
Oh, 10 minutes? Nice. I'm cutting it off. 7:38, I'm out of here.
Okay, 7:40. How about 7:40? Is that
Okay,
that
7:40, I'm out of here.
There we go. Look at Dan negotiate. So no, yeah, that was great to be with them. I want to play that Angie Nixon clip, the one who was the Florida state legislator who was one of only two people who voted for, I think, like a ceasefire, like a call for a ceasefire from the state of Florida. Ron DeSantis in the debate made a big deal about how apparently he circumvented. I almost said a different C word that would have sounded very strange and bad in this context.
That's how he looks when he's like in the debate stage when he's not talking. He looks like he's getting circumcised. He's like,
there's so much. This should just be called the danger zone because there's so much we could do. But Ron DeSantis was bragging about going around the U.S. government to try to get Floridians and Americans on planes back to Florida. And so, meanwhile, on the other side, you have a call for a ceasefire from, these two Democrats in the state. God bless them. Here is how that went and how you'll see another politician respond to that.
We are at 10,000 dead Palestinians. How many will be enough? I also...
oh my God.
One of my colleagues just said all of them. Wow. One of my colleagues said all of them. One of my colleagues also stated that this is going to dry up their fundraising if we vote on this resolution. I also want that, that's what we've become in this state. That's what we've become in this state, where we don't care about innocent babies that don't even get the opportunity to blow out their first birthday candle.
Yeah, like they don't care. It's usually there's political subtext where you think, oh, like when Bam says we'll never have Medicare for all in this country because that would involve giving free healthcare to blacks, so it's just never going to happen in the United States. Like that's implicitly said in the ways that Republicans usually say, no, we don't want to help black people. You know, tax cuts and private options. That's literally how it's always been done. Direct relation to that. Now you're getting the same sort of brazenness that you got from, was his name like Lee Atwater? Literally what I'm talking what I'm literally talking about, this whole taxes thing.
Take it back.
If I remember correct,
who's that? Robert E. Lee?
1980s genocide and presidential debates. Never forget. Where I made both Bam and Emma and Ben Bam eyes. No, but yeah, Lee Atwater was a Republican strategist. He had worked through a bunch of other campaigns, and during the civil rights interview, he even said like, oh, if you're talking about N-word, 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 he said the N-word, hard R, then you start to lose people. But if you say, oh, the reason we don't want school integration is because of forced busing or states' rights or lower taxes, then you can start to win people. And so you don't have to say N-word, N-word, N-word. like that's the full quote. The Nation has that. And so we're getting to 1980, which, by the way, that was an interview from the 1980s. If people think, oh, that was the civil rights era where people were so racist on TV. No. 1980s, that was the one word you could say on television. The one bad word, right? But I'm saying that all to say, just to give the context, I dropped Lee Atwater out of nowhere, right? You're getting that same sort of brazenness today, where politicians are on record going, oh, how many more Palestinians need to die? All of them. Double it and give it to the next guy. Like these, when you have boring ass Tim Scott saying that, I was kind of waiting for the moment for him to pivot and do something else, but no, he said America needs to be strong enough to be able to fight war with China over Taiwan and fight war with Russia over Ukraine and fight war with question marks to protect Israel, and to also be ready for new threats from space. And we need more money in this country to do that. By the way, we're not going to raise taxes, and we're going to cut a lot of social programs. That's just how it be from the Republican Party. And on the Democratic Party, you have pass or I abstain for the majority of the party. And the last little bit are, like people of color, largely, who are standing up and saying no. Jewish folks who are standing up and saying no.
Yeah, it's just, it's just one of those situations. Like, I mean, it's even unprecedented for me because as someone who's obviously paid attention to what's going on in Israel Palestine for a very long time, like, excuse me, Hamas has shot rockets into Israel before, and they've even killed a few people, but it's like 10 or 11 at the most. And then like Israel does some brazen shit and we go protest them. Or when the last time that I was at a protest, I want to say that was 2021. It was because Palestinians were like protesting and they were going up to the border fence and like Israeli soldiers were shooting them. And it was like, and then, they were like, oh, they're
the day of return, right?
Yeah, they were like, oh, they're lighting balloons on fire and they're sailing into our like some crazy shit. But it was like there was like the obvious aggressor was Israel, and then it barely hits the radar of American politicians. Like it doesn't even it's not like something that they need to necessarily talk about, even though like people that like care and know about the situation are out in the streets. But this time it's just like they're just brain fried because Hamas was like up to score on them.
As it's like
And
their country with, they brag about this Iron Dome. They brag about all this defensive surveillance technology. Israel's the #1 exporter of surveillance technology on phones in the world. So think about that the next time you use Waze. They brag all about this stuff, and they had like paragliders who got past them.
hang gliders.
They had more. They had more people who were like they had more missiles breach past the Iron Dome than they ever have before.
Yeah, and like it's just it's just a different situation.
BB just doesn't want to get Vietnamed is the thing. Like he just doesn't want to get Vietnamed.
Yeah, like generally, American politicians are not really talking about that situation. They just feel like it's not even that serious to talk about. But I think when people saw like 1,400 Israelis die, it's like, I guess they get a pass to do whatever they want. And it's like, well, damn, dude, like this is the stuff they do all the time. Like they do this every few years. And it's really like the thing for me is like Israel, like I have no problem saying this, like no problem at all. Israel is targeting civilians.
Yes.
They're targeting civilians. Hamas fighters are not putting themselves in the line of rocket fire, missile fire, or gunfire. They're not out there to get killed until the Israeli soldiers come into Gaza, like on foot or in tanks. That's when they come out. Other than that, they're in bunkers and they're away from that stuff. Like they're not getting killed in missile attacks. But you see that they're fighting against Israel. There's video. Hamas is putting out video every day of their soldiers fighting against Israeli soldiers. Every day, like constantly there's videos. I'm not going to tell you where to find them, but there's videos coming out every day of Hamas fighters fighting against Israeli soldiers.
My FBI agent's going to love that.
You would think, well, the FBI, they're watching them too. You would think that when there's 10,000, let's just say people, at least 10,000 people killed in these bombings, you would think they got all the Hamas fighters. Like you leveled a whole.
Hamas is like 40,000 people, right? So like.
No, definitely not. Definitely less than that. Like 100% is less than that.
Okay, I was seeing some numbers that like it was something like that. Definitely no higher than, right? But yeah,
it's definitely not 40,000 people. It's not. It's not. There's no way. There's no way that's 40,000 people. But either way, like when you look at where they bombed, it's gone. Like the shit is sand. But
20 to 25,000.
But like they still, that makes more sense.
Okay. Sorry, I was reading too much New York Times.
But you're telling me that you're like inflating them like Trump in his apartment. But you're telling me like they still got people to fight against it. Like I'm sure at least like 50 Israeli soldiers are dead by now. You didn't kill them. You bombed the whole thing. But they don't care. They're targeting civilians. 100%.
They're targeting they're doing triple taps, which is
they're targeting ambulances. They're targeting the corridors where they're leaving.
They're targeting hospital blocks. Then they're targeting hospitals. They're targeting first responders. Then they're targeting second responders.
If Israel's so badass, if you're so gangster, go get your man. Go get him. Like they know by like flying planes and bombing and shooting, like they know they're targeting civilians. If you're so gangster, if these people are savages and they're primitive and you got all the technology and the guns that go around the corner and shit, go get them. Because honestly, if Israel comes out with like the Hamas dudes with the green mask and the shit around there, you know what I mean? Nobody's tripping. Nobody's tripping if y'all get it cracking and y'all are pulling out Hamas fighters with their okay, dude, it's a war. But when it's children and innocent people, you're genocidal. But if y'all were just fighting Hamas, if you're willing to take the L's and you give them go do your thing, just like in Israel when Hamas or whoever would bomb. I know I'm going off. Whenever they would bomb like checkpoints and things like that, I've gone over my time. I'm out of here. Whenever they would bomb like checkpoints or like shoot at checkpoints and like Israeli soldiers would die, that wasn't a big deal in Israel. They're soldiers, like that's cannon fodder. But when like innocent people would die, civilians in a cafe or whatever, that's a big deal. Same thing with Hamas. Like nobody's gonna be like tripping that much if y'all go in there and fight Hamas. But y'all are targeting civilians.
They've like the IDF has no goodwill in any of this. Like with barely even with like the Israeli population. Like you've got some Israelis who are starting to straight up become fuck the police because of how badly they're throwing people on the ground, other Israelis over this. But yeah, like when you had Osama bin Laden and they were talking about how he has a city underneath his little pyramid out in Abbottabad, Afghanistan, with like Pakistan, like all of the shit they were talking.
I'm mad you remember Abbottabad. I'm mad you remember that.
Okay. Because Bam thinks I have the worst memory ever because of all the weed, and I have to remind him every once in a while, like, no, I remember this.
I forgot about Abbottabad.
They were talking about because there's Islamabad and there's Abbottabad. You definitely want to go to the Islamabad airport. You're ever in the vicinity, but they were talking about all these underground caves and tunnels and satellite dishes and ability to surveillance, and they popped in on a chopper and stole Osama bin Laden's Xbox 360 in about like 30 minutes.
Literally.
Because like, again, not to shout out the war machine, but all of Obama's drone strikes were not as effective in killing terrorists, and had much more collateral damage. The continuation of wars in Afghanistan and Iran and support of wars in Yemen, those were not good efforts at all. If you want to kill a terrorist, do some goddamn spy work, send some people in and kill the terrorist. Especially when it's not like you're breaking into, Manhattan or London or a place with like a bunch of security that's like really well protected for a city, or like Singapore, right? Like you're talking about all these underground caves. You're calling it the Gaza subway. But like the New York subway, it's just falling apart. Apparently, like it's nothing.
No,
that little metro line on the 105.
Sadly, like I hate that this is the case, but just like in general, war is inevitable. Sadly, hopefully we get to Star Trek
Doom
world,
or Bam.
But it's inevitable. Male insecurity is the most dangerous force in the world, my slogan. But in this situation, like, I don't care who I'm talking to. Put me right in front of the Benny Gantz or whoever. I'm going to tell them that the IDF is targeting civilians. And if he's honest, he'll be like, yeah. And if he's honest, he'll say yes. And if he's like a little dishonest, he'll say, well, that's what they did to us. But it's like, no, like that's what they're going to do. They target civilians. They can't get the Hamas people from bombing. You're not going to get them. It doesn't work like that.
You want to get you in
They're
trouble?
going to come out from the bunker with their rockets and their shit, and they're going to, okay, yeah, there they go. Let's fight them.
Want me to get you in trouble?
What?
No. I mean, like, I don't know, but I'm just going to go for it. If there is any sort of end game, because people are always asking, like, what's the number that is fine with Israel continuing this bombing campaign? And the way they're talking about, totally eradicating Hamas or eliminating Hamas, that number might be, horrendously up to 20 to 25,000 if that's like their believed or perceived membership count. So BB can go back and say, okay, well, I eliminated Hamas. They have this many number of fighters. We've gotten this many. The IDF people are stats whores anyways, and
True.
Hamas is gonna kill him again. Like Hamas is gonna strike again. Is the whole thing?
Yeah, of course.
It's gonna be like a dumb exercise, but like, you know, it's gonna happen during the next administration because it's like every 3 or 4 years, and it's just all gonna be for nothing. And then that's why people are so. That's why people watching. That's why people who really know about what's going on, but also like people who care about humanity and don't like to see the videos of babies with missing parts of their heads. Like it's an issue that people care about.
Yeah, it's just futile. It's just like, you know, it's just like getting revenge for revenge's sake. And you know, people want to think that like this country that is like was made to be a homeland for Jews wouldn't be resorting to things like that. But you know, it's still an active occupation, and that's just what happens. Like this isn't too much different than what you know, white America did to the native people of this land. It's not that much different.
Comments, and then we'll start to wind down. But Valinova gifted 10 subs, 10 subscriptions.
Damn,
that's amazing.
thuggin'.
Bam, you're a member now. So you get the members things that exist, and you're supporting. But no, Valinova, you were watching earlier to this whole stream. You've been watching the whole thing, holding it down on Twitch. Thank you. Really appreciate you. Hope you've enjoyed this conversation. Hope you'll enjoy the many more. I think Bam is retired. He's like had too much fun on this show and has been too tired of me. He'll be making his return for that Gavin Newsom, Ron DeSantis ass pounding.
Oh my god! Oh my god!
Who's gonna
Insane.
Bam? Who has a better chance of being the Republican nominee, Ron DeSantis or Gavin Newsom?
I know, seriously. Like, I think Gavin Newsom could trick them into voting for him. I think he's clever enough.
he goes to Kimberly Guilfoyle on some I should call her. remember they were married, right?
Yeah, or I don't know if they were married, but they were together. Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, they were together. Gavin Newsom, until very recently, wasn't really the marriage type. Let me just say that. As I like to make sure people don't remember, or people always. Gavin Newsom slept with his
sounds like
best friend's
personal
wife.
experience.
Oh no. All right. That was a good show. I'm gonna stay on for a little bit longer and just go through some comments, maybe answer some questions.
Okay.
Bam, thank you for joining. Get me a good photo of your face and it will make it onto the next thumbnail.
No, just put some other black athlete like you did last time.
Restraint.
Don't do it.
I'll do what I did in the group. I'll do what you thought I was gonna do in the group chat. How about that?
Yeah, exactly. There you go. All right, guys.
Thank you.
See ya.
All right. Yeah, there's so many comments. There's so much good conversation. There's a lot of stuff going on. So thank you I tried to respond in the comments as well. So thank you for the appreciation on that and the patience on that. I want to give a shout out to Sachi for producing the show, helping to hold it down, really coming into his own over the past couple of weeks. And he's actually going to be on with the debate coverage a couple weeks back. Not a couple weeks back. Jesus Christ. Yesterday. Like literally just yesterday. He was supposed to be on the debate coverage with us then. He couldn't make it because he was sick. Hopefully he's feeling a little bit better, at least a day's better. And he'll be on in a future episode because he's really smart and really locked in with the kind of stuff we talk about on the show. And that was a show. All right. It was really smart. It was really enlightening. I think we navigated the conversation really well. I only said a couple of dumb things. So really good. Fun in the sun. Good in the hood. Let me see. There's some recent comments. Corn Pop for Prez. I can't wait to go back and check it out. Yeah, definitely go back and check it out. And Corn Pop for Prez, thank you for being in the stream like you. Love to see the day ones in here, like Bad Lefty, like Felipe Auguste. Yeah, the one time I wasn't on the YouTube, I was on the YouTube side. Bullshit. Yeah, I don't know. Felipe Auguste too. I think this is in a mocking voice, but yeah. Obama did the best he could. Wow. Oh, is there some commentary in here? No. As if I'm not an adult. Goodbye to the brave 20 left. Derek Hunziker. What was Derek Hunziker on about? Bad Lefty. Hope you're not scaring people away again. Just teasing. Donald James, holding it down. Good to see you. Thank you for watching. Yeah, Sachi mentioned the comment from Brian Mast, who was the House Republican that House Democrats were trying to censure, and it wasn't even let through. That's what I was mentioning earlier when I was saying that you could say genocidal rhetoric towards Palestinians and it doesn't go through, but you could say genocidal rhetoric you can say genocidal rhetoric towards Israelis and it doesn't go through. And by the way, no one's really saying genocidal rhetoric towards Israelis if they're an elected official. There've been some weird anti-Semitic things said by a lot of elected officials, like there's Marjorie Taylor Greene's Jewish space laser comment. I can go on. But yeah, it was Representative Mast who said, quote, I would not so lightly call them innocent Palestinians. We wouldn't be quick to call innocent Nazis. Because you're basically calling all Palestinians Nazis. Calling an entire group of people, civilians, a population of mostly people under the age of 18. And it's not like Palestinians have access to, you know, Xbox Live, where you potentially could have teenage Nazis, although that's mostly in America. But anyways, I digress. You can't call people where Emma has that stat. Every 10 minutes, another child dies in Palestine, based on the statistics that are going on. You can't have that kind of dynamic consistently and like continue on for a long period of time if you are going to, you know, like, you can't call that not genocidal rhetoric. You can't call that not genocidal behavior. You can't call that not supporting. If you can't even like come up to at least like ethnic cleansing on what it is, we're talking about getting rid of cultures, getting rid of places where people have been for generations, and an effort that's been going on for a long period of time. People can't call that for what it is. Then you have to question, okay, are you really, again, like not even on the left, are you even like moderately liberal, even moderately progressive? There are a lot of people who call themselves progressives with media platforms. I'm not going to get into it right now, but there are a lot of people who call themselves progressive with media platforms who are basically just mouthpieces for what the IDF is saying. I have a photo here. I do. I have a photo here of the Congress people who stood up. These are the Congress people who signed onto a ceasefire. And you know, we've gone from ceasefire is anti-Semitic to we're going to do 4-hour humanitarian pauses is currently what Israel is saying. And they may like own up to that or they may not. But that's not terrible progress. That's pretty decent. These calls are moving the needle. They're effective. they're not as effective as they need to be. And I don't think that's a fault of activists on the ground. More people on the ground and more activists can help. So if you're watching and maybe being vocal about these things and speaking on them, you don't feel comfortable doing, or you don't feel confident doing, but you do feel comfortable and confident with donating to Jewish Voices for Peace, donating to other humanitarian groups who are in Gaza and on the ground right now, who need support and protection and love. And by going to protests and calling your representatives to tell them how you feel about this. If you feel like, House elections are coming up in most cases next year in 2024, there's a lot of Senate elections that are coming up in 2024. If you feel like you especially live in a place that's close and you're going to withhold your vote over this, prove Bam wrong, right? Talk to some people who live in your area who would pull their votes for a congressperson or a senator who's on the wrong side of this. And if all 5 of you call, if all 5 of you email, if all 5 of you leave messages, or if all 5 of you keep on doing that, or that 5 of you get another 5 and it's 25, but if you flood their answering systems and their emails with the same message, they're going to see the scale of it. They're going to see the intensity and the passion of it. I've been really motivated by a lot of what I've seen. I wish I was more motivated than I was distraught, disappointed, and again, shocked to see the way a lot of people are treating the situation writ large. Then yeah, I would certainly be a lot happier. But it goes to the thesis of the show, right? That's how I really end the show. The thesis of the show is the world and everything we're viewing is all about power dynamics. Who has power, who wants power, who needs power. But ultimately, the end of that is that the power is always within you. And for a lot of folks around the world, it's hard to express that power because you have authoritarian governments or governments that will crack down on any sort of disapproval of how they're doing things. They are, there are people who feel disenfranchised by their governments because they are not being heard by those same governments, right? And they feel like this government's never going to hear them unless they're really rich or they're close friends, usually both. And so they start to lose that feeling that they have power within them. But no, you do. Stand up, use your voice, whatever you can do, whatever you have time to do, whatever efforts you can. It all adds up. It all makes a difference. Cowardice is not needed in this moment. And the power is within each and every one of the people watching this to not just make a difference, but amplify the amount of difference they can make. There's a lot of issues that people can care about, and there's a lot of issues that can feel really close to people, but when you're seeing something, a human rights atrocity like this, it's a moral and true imperative to do something about it, especially when that atrocity is being done with tax dollars that aren't going towards things you may feel are closer to home to you, or things you're really passionate about. A lot of folks are passionate about climate, reproductive rights, racism and social justice, economic justice in the form of a fairer economy, higher wages, Medicare for all, lower prices on goods, services, universal housing, all these other things, right? Those are all how we spend our taxes. And those are all grinding battles where people on our side tell us no, and people who aren't are on our side tell us we're pie in the sky, ridiculous, and dreaming. And then all those exact same people will go, oh, genocide? How many billions of dollars do you need? And how fast can we get it to you? How many weapons and tanks do you need? And how fast can we get it to you? There's one more thing that I know haven't seen pointed out a lot here. And it's my, I studied economics in college. It was the original sort of avenue for my interest in politics. And it's something that, I've shied away from it in large part because people find it boring. But I think charts are helpful. And when you look at the stock price of, let's look at Northrop Grumman. And let's look for a view over the past, 6 months, right? And how they've been doing. Defense contractors. 6 months, middling, and then all of a sudden, after October 6th and October 7th, jump. Massive jump by $50. These companies are where your Medicare for All money is going. These are defense contractors where the government pays to make bombs and weapons. Boeing, they make other things than bombs and weapons, sure. But you're seeing a similar increase. Well, after October here, it's kind of going down, but Northrop Grumman, Lockheed Martin, you're seeing increases right after October 6th and October 9th. They are winning from this. This is where our money is going to, and it's going for genocidal effects. The power is within you to say you don't want government money to go to that. So I have a lot of respect for peace activists. Democracy Now! Has been, on the left and not in favor of the invasion between Russia and Ukraine, but not from like the post-lefty kind of way of doing it, but from the way of Democracy Now! Calls himself the War and Peace Report. It is a very peace as a foreign policy option focused podcast. And so Philippe Auguste saying BRB gotta send up for after hours margins trading, should be fine. All those things, all those policy priorities I was mentioning that the left cares about: environmental justice, climate justice, social justice, economic justice. All of those things we're not getting, due in large part to how quickly we send money for these proxy wars to our allies overseas. And in Israel, I prefer we did not do that pretty much at all. I could maybe be convinced for some cases in some situations, but really, I don't trust a cent to this government, and I don't really feel that way anymore. There's the situation in Ukraine, which I think is a little bit different. I don't feel that, we should very quickly be sending $33 billion here, $10 billion there. Biden just signaled that any bill to fund Israel but not fund Ukraine would get vetoed. And so Biden's getting ready to take that political smoke on that argument that it is so crucial to fund these foreign proxy wars that Biden's even willing to touch the third rail of looking weak on Israel as a Democratic politician. It's weird times, very weird times we're living in. And yeah, a lot of people seeing a lot of love for democracy now. I agree. It's one of the staples. And as I've been, I encourage folks, this is maybe not advantageous to someone who's hosting a show, but I hope that by giving these kinds of, having interviews like the ones we just had, or having panels like the one we just had, because it wasn't really an interview, it was more of a panel, and having topics and having conversations and discussions the way I do, that continues like my value of a show, definitely enough to sustain this and be able to do it more and, maybe quit my day job and, properly compensate my team. But also, what I say that to say is I would encourage people to constantly assess the media that you're paying attention to and keeping it in your life only if it consistently provides you value. Otherwise, if you feel like, oh, this is moderately entertaining, but I'm not really learning much, or, this is a lot of like focusing on certain things that don't feel like it matters or is as relevant to politics of the news as it's happening, or, whatever you're listening. Right? I've gotten, because I've liked different hosts and I've listened to different shows. I'm not going to get any names here because a lot of these aren't even politics, right? But I feel that it's a good practice for every news consumer to have to maybe every 4 months, maybe every 6 months. If you're listening to podcasts or radio shows or watching TV shows on routine, really figure out why. Like, are you really getting things from that? There are a lot of options out there. Do you need help finding other options? Like that's what this should kind of be all. Be an active news consumer. And yeah, Felipe Auguste, thank you for saying you rock, Dan. It's not a dick measuring contest between you and Amy. And it's not what I mean. I'm not trying to compare to Democracy Now! I was kind of saying I think Democracy Now! Is a really good show, and it's one of the shows I think has stood the test of time. The first episode of Democracy Now! Aired a week before I was born, in 1996. So, they've been really at it. Literally for longer than I've been alive, although depending on what Republican state you're in, that's debatable. I'm just saying that it's prudent on people as news consumers to assess who they're watching. Like, you just gotta do that. And cut out people who are not providing you value and add in people who are providing you value and mix it up. So, yeah, that's kind of like what I encourage. There's a lot of power that you have both personally with what you do, as a person who's consuming information to hopefully gain the confidence and gain the ability to talk on these things with confidence. But also you have the power to talk on these things with confidence and apply these learnings and apply this passion and apply this interest towards making a difference and maximizing your difference. The power is within you to learn and grow. The power is within you to make a difference. But the last thing I'll leave with is that the power is within you to take care of yourselves. Like, this is a really tough time, and we all have our vices of choice, let's say. But in that vein, it's really important for us to take care of ourselves, to do things that help them with their mental status, right? I had someone in chat earlier who said, I'm going to have this on in the background so that I can listen to... Like, I'm going to listen to this in the background so I can do some art, so I can do some drawing, so I can do some, relaxing, some chores, like whatever. You can't fight these battles if you're not refreshed, tanned, rested, and ready to do these kinds of things. And so take care of yourself, be kind to yourself, be kind and forgiving to friends, so long as they're not monsters who refuse to move away from caring about human rights. And don't forget the power is always within you in a lot of ways, but that's how I will Yeah, usually we go to 9, but we did 2 shows back to back where we did like a lot of really good stuff here. No one make any news on Friday, all right? No one make any news. No one make any news. We're all tired. Too much. All right, y'all. Thank you very much for watching and listening. We'll be back next week with more. Support us on Twitch or YouTube. We got gifted subs today. That's like super helpful. Every little bit counts. Like I said, we're trying to get to at least, again, I don't know if profitability is like a near thing with Syndicate 23, but being able to pay all of our bills, which we're actually pretty close to doing. So not paying for the services we use to publish things, not paying for the software used to publish things, that's great too. If you have the ability to donate or subscribe or become a channel member on YouTube, I think I need to turn on that setting, but do that as well. We really appreciate it, but bare minimum, share it, word of mouth. We really appreciate that. Do it on platforms that aren't X, ideally. Like, clip anything I make TikToks, anything you want to do. I appreciate it. We love you very much. Also, I see support policies, not politicians, in chat as well. We want to shout you out as well and say hi. But yes, thank you for the support. Thank you for the help. Thank you for, there's a super chat earlier that someone sent as well. But yes, good night. Good luck. Happy Friday. And also, don't forget Audio Face. Audio Face is there too. New music every Sunday.